So when I was growing up and getting into guitar playing, the idea of owning a valve amp seemed like something that was really unobtainable, because at that point in time, valve amps, even though they were a lot cheaper than they are now, were still very expensive for a beginner guitar player. So I made do in my early stages of playing with a bunch of real cheap and horrible sounding little amps that never quite did the job. And one day I finally got my hands on a valve amp and it changed everything. Now, the reason I'm telling you that story is because these days, you don't actually have to spend a ton of money to get a great sounding valve amp. And in this video, we're going to prove that. We're going to be checking out this amp from Harley Benton. This is the TUBE15. So the TUBE15 is an all-valve amp from the guys at Harley Benton that actually clocks in at £222. Now, when I first saw that price, I had to double take it as well, because while I know that Harley Benton make really great affordable products, the idea of a valve amp coming in at that price didn't seem right. But it is true. This is a £222 amp. Now, you might think in order to get the amp to that, kind of price range, there's going to be some major compromises. But you'd actually be surprised when you actually dig into the spec of this thing, what's actually inside. So in this video, we're going to be doing that. Before I show you the amp and talk about the specs of this, I just want to let you guys know this is a sponsored video. The guys at Harley Benton are paying me to make this video, and they've provided me with the TUBE15 as well for the purpose of making this video. As always though, all the thoughts and opinions contained in the video are my own. So, TUBE15, this is part of their Tube series. There's a 5-watt combo, and there's also a 30-watt head as well to go with this. There's some links down below in the description for this and the rest of the series as well, so you can check them out. This is a 1x12 combo. This is the 15-watt amp, and it is a Class AB amp. It's got a pair of EL84s and 3 12AX7s inside. It's technically a single channel amp, but it can do both clean and overdriven sounds very well. It's got a really interactive master volume and gain control section, so we can dial in the perfect clean or the perfect kind of crunchy rock sound. With it being an EL84 amp, think of that kind of voxy sort of sound. It's going to give you that British mid-range with a little bit of that voxy kind of crunch to it. What this isn't is a high gain metal amp. This is going to be more suited for your kind of blues, indie, classic rock kind of vibe. You can get some higher gain rock sounds, but you're not going to get metal sounds out of this thing. You need to pair this with an additional overdrive pedal to get into that kind of ballpark. So on the front panel of the amp is the one thing that I think is maybe the thing that lets this amp down, is the mirrored faceplate. Now, it looks really cool when you see it in the room. If you actually look at this amp in person, it's a great idea. But when you actually look at this on camera, you can't actually see what anything does. All you can see is a reflection right there of a guitar pedal that is on my desk currently in tuner mode. So you can see what my guitar is going to be tuned to, but you can't see any of the information on the front panel. So while the front panel does look quite cool, it's not a very practical thing for either making videos with or for live use, because you wouldn't actually see the black text written against the mirrored faceplate. If I sort of insert my hand into the shot in various places without obscuring the camera, you can kind of see underneath the black text for everything. So as we go through this video, I'm going to tell you what things are, but there's going to be an element of you needing to remember what things are as well, so you can see what's happening when I'm moving things. So this here is the gain control. We have the master volume. Then we have a tone control. This is quite an interesting feature because this has a tone and a 3-band EQ, bass, middle, and treble, and then a reverb control. And then here we have a little button that takes this from 15 watt mode, which is currently in, down to 1 watt mode. So we've got some power scaling, so if you're playing at home or you want to just record the sound of a really cranked amp, you can put that power scaling mode on as well. On the rear of the amp, there's an effects loop. There's also a foot switch jack that you can use to switch the reverb on and off, but a foot switch is not included with the amp. And also there's a speaker output. When you connect another cabinet or a IR loader to the speaker output, it automatically bypasses the onboard speaker, which is how I've got this set up today. And probably the most surprising thing about this amp is the speaker they've put in this. You've got a real Celestion, which is a Celestion 7080 speaker. Now, if you're a fan of Celestion speakers, you'll know that's not the highest end Celestion available. It's one of the more affordable ones, but it's a great speaker upgrade for any amps that you need a speaker upgrade for. It's a good starting point into the world of better speakers. Now, the fact that this comes with that straight out of the box is great, because usually in an amp like this, what a lot of people might upgrade would be the speakers. So to have a good speaker straight away is going to set you on the right path very quickly. So the Celestion inside is going to play a big part in how good this thing sounds. So for £222, you get a real Celestion speaker, all tube, single channel, with a great kind of voxy crunch to it when you push it, power scaling, and built-in reverb, and an effects loop. So you get a lot of amp for your money here. So that is about it spec-wise. I think I've pretty much covered everything there. So now I'm going to plug it in and we're going to hear some sounds. So the guitar I'm using in this video is the Sire Guitars T7 FM. This is a really cool T-style guitar with twin humbuckers, but a couple of single coil split options in there as well. This is going straight into the TUBE15, which is going via the 2-notes torpedo Captor X. So I'm not using the onboard speaker today, I'm using an IR of a Celestion speaker straight out of the speaker output on the back of the amp. So I mentioned that there's a tone control and a 3-band EQ. So we have the 3-band EQ, treble, middle and bass, and then the tone control. Now this is quite an unconventional setup because usually an amp would have a tone control or a 3-band EQ. So the way that I would always recommend using this kind of setup when you come across it is to use the tone control kind of like a master tone. So set it straight up the middle to start with, and then using the 3-band EQ, kind of dial in your sound, and then use the tone control as a measure of the overall brightness or darkness of the amp. So if you dial in your 3-band EQ the way you want it, and then you're playing a gig or a rehearsal, you want the amp slightly darker, you can move that master tone down and it'll just take the kind of whole EQ spectrum down a little bit, or the opposite, you can boost that as well. One thing that is slightly strange, and I've not really seen this on any other amp, is the way that the EQ section is labeled on this amp. So the tone control and the 3-band EQ all have the midnight position, which would typically be about 5 on a regular EQ, is actually 0. And then as you increase the control, it goes 1 through 5. And as you decrease the control, it goes -1 to -5. So you can kind of always try and treat 0 as like your neutral point. So when I'm EQing the amp, I will always start with everything on midnight like that, so 0. So I'm going to start just by dialing in a sound that I like with the clean sound. So to get a clean sound, I've got the gain really, really low and the volume on, I'm just going to set that just over halfway. Now I've got the EQ section all set to midnight, so I'm not going to touch the tone for now. I'm just going to dial in something with my 3-band EQ by just playing this with a split coil sound. I'm using a split coil in both pickups at the same time, and I'm just going to get a nice EQ position that I like, and then we'll go from there. So here's how it sounds neutral, and then I'm going to make some tweaks. So I quite like that as an EQ point. There's a little bit of a mid boost there, and I've just boosted the lows and highs very, very slightly. Now, mentioned that you can use the tone control as like a master tone. So if I thought that was too bright, I could just simply turn that tone control down. And you'll see that that just takes the edge off my clean tone. So I like that dialed back just slightly because this has quite a bright split coil sound. So that is a pretty good starting point for what I would like as a clean tone. I would maybe have a little bit more reverb in my own sound. So it's a very easy amp to dial in. So I'm just going to play a little bit, and I'm going to go from some humbucker clean tones. So I'm going to do the bridge humbucker and the neck humbucker. So the first thing you notice there, before I even continue, is because I turned the volume up, I've actually pushed the amp a little bit by going to humbucker mode. So I'm going to bring the volume back a little bit now. This shows how responsive the amp circuit is. So with humbuckers, you do get that little push to the front end of the amp that just kind of takes it off clean. If I go to just a neck single coil, it's going to be a much cleaner sound. So it's very, very responsive. If I go to the bridge humbucker, even though the gain is set very, very low, we get into this light bluesy crunch, which is really nice. So now I'm just going to start bringing up the gain a little bit, and because that's so responsive, I'm going to bring the volume back a touch. So let's go to about there on the gain. So again, humbuckers really give that a nice push. Now a neck single coil sound. That works great as like a kind of a bluesy rock tone. I really like that. Now, we're going to start going into some of the higher gain sounds this amp can do. Now, like I said at the start of the video, this is not going to be a metal amp. It's going to give you more of that kind of classic rock, kind of voxy crunch. Now that again is a good example of where I would use the tone control, because as I'm pushing the gain, it's getting a little bit bright. So I'm going to bring that tone down a little bit to compensate. Now we're going to push the gain all the way up, and this is the max amount of gain this amp has. So there's plenty of gain there to keep most people happy. If you're playing blues or classic rock, there's enough there, you know, to really get you going. But like I said, that's not really going to give you that kind of metal saturation. Where I think this amp really kind of excels is some of the mid-gain sounds. That's when you get that real nice kind of voxy mid-range crunch, but then you can use the EQ to really push that in a bunch of different directions. So let's say I wanted quite a dark sound. I could roll that tone all the way down. Or I could go the complete opposite way and add a lot of cut to my sound. So even though it has just a single channel, it's very, very versatile. What you can also do is you can turn the gain right down and turn the volume up. This is a great way to get into some of those kind of cranked boutique amp style sounds. Got that really nice kind of edge of breakup thing going on there. It actually feels very responsive to play as well in this setup, which I think is a big part in why an amp would feel good to a player, because when you play soft, you get that nice chimey sound, and then when you dig in, that really kind of pushes over the edge very nicely. What you can also do is, if you are playing at home or you're recording and you just can't really crank the amp to get that sound, hit the power scaling switch and then it scales it down to 1 watt. That's a really nice way to just get that extra kind of grunt from the amp. You get that real cranked amp sound, but at a volume that is not going to upset your neighbors. That 1 watt mode is an incredibly useful feature. That also handles the gain in a different way, because as you can hear from the hiss, it's going to give you a bit more gain because it's going to be more compressed. That's probably the most amount of gain you're going to get from the amp. It does get quite bright in this mode. I do also still have the tone control turned up full as well though, so if I turn that back, That's a really nice feeling tone. It's very kind of fat and chewy feeling. So as I mentioned, you get a lot of flexibility from that 3-band EQ. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just dial it back a little bit to a more crunchy sound. I'm going to set the tone control straight up, and I'm just going to sweep each of the 3 EQ bands all the way down and all the way up so you can hear what they're doing. So inside each of those EQ controls, there's quite a big range. And the final thing to look at is the reverb. So for most of this video, you've heard the reverb at about 1 or 2 o'clock. I'm going to push this back now to 9 o'clock, and we're going to go up the whole range. You'll notice I've reset the EQ all to midnight just so we've got quite a neutral sound. The gain I've dialed right back, so I've got just like a pushed clean sound. We're going to be using this to hear the reverb. So the reverb at 9 o'clock adds a little bit of ambience without being too overbearing. So you can hear there's a nice little ambient tail there, but it's not super bloomy and it doesn't kind of engulf your sound too much. Where the reverb really starts to kick in is when you get to about that midnight point. That's where we hear more of a kind of a long form tail. Then we go up again, so about 3/4 of the way. Now we're getting a little bit more of a tail. It's kind of like a whole reverb, but there's almost like a little bit of a spring in there. Right at the tail end, it's got that kind of bounce. Now I actually want to jump back into the video here and say that when I shot the video, I mentioned the reverb being quite springy. What I actually realized is after I'd finished shooting the video and I started shooting the B-roll, I looked in the back of the amp and there is actually a spring reverb tank. So the reason the reverb on this amp sounds springy, as I explained, is because it is actually a spring reverb. So with that said, back to the video. And then all the way up. Now we've got, there's not actually a huge amount of difference there between 3/4 of the way up and all the way up, but we've still got that nice kind of springy tail. It's a little bit more prominent. That's a really nice reverb. Even with it on full, it doesn't completely engulf your sound. So even on full, that's a really usable reverb sound. So there you go. There is the Harley Benton TUBE15. Now, I'll be completely honest, I am a little bit blown away by how good this is, considering the price. When I, decided that I was going to make a video on this thing, I will be completely honest, my expectations were not as high as they should have been, given how good this thing actually does sound and feel to play. I entered into the video kind of thinking, maybe it's going to be an okay amp for the money, but I'm actually very surprised how good this thing actually is. So well done for the guys at Harley Benton for making an amp for just over £200 that sounds and feels as good as this thing does. Because I have owned valve amps for many years. And, you know, I've spent a lot of money on valve amps in all different price ranges, from kind of mid £500-600 range right up to £2,000. And this is just as good as any of them. I mean, I can't speak for the long-term quality of an amp in this price. You know, I've not taken this out on tour. I don't know how well it would hold up on the road. But if you're looking for your first kind of serious amp to play or record with, or you just want a really cool valve amp to play at home, there's no reason why every guitar player in the world probably shouldn't own one of these. This is a great sounding amp, and yeah, I really like it. So if you guys think the same and you enjoy the sounds, there's some links down below in the description where you can check this out for yourself. I am really impressed, I'll be honest. I think this sounds great. And yeah, again, well done, Harley Benton. You guys have done a great job on this thing. If you like the sounds of this thing, there's some links down below in the description where you can check this thing out for yourself. As I said, it comes in a smaller combo than this, and also a head version as well. Don't forget to let me know down below in the comments what you guys think of the sound of this thing as well. I'd love to hear what you guys think of the sound of this, and if you've played one of these yourself, I'd also love to hear what your feedback is. Now, I know, obviously, we couldn't cover every single tone in one video. This does have a really flexible EQ section, and you could probably dial it in to do most things. You've heard what I've done with it today, and you know, you can use your own imagination of what you can do with an EQ that's that flexible. You can make it do pretty much most things: classic rock, blues, indie, some cool clean sounds. The only thing it doesn't really do is high gain metal. So as long as you're not looking for that specific sound, there's probably something in this that you would enjoy. So yeah, let me know what you guys think down below. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you so much for watching.